Call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silent prayer for our servicemen and women and for all of those who have passed away in our community. Roll call, please.
Mr. Perry?
Here.
Mr. Donahue?
Here.
Mr. Evans?
Here.
Mr. Gahn?
Here.
Mr. Rogan?
Here. Please dispense with the reading of the minutes.
Third order, 3A Tax Assessor's Report for hearing date to be held October 30, 2018.
Are there any comments? If not, received and filed.
3B Minutes of the Scranton-Lackawanna Health and Welfare Authority meeting held June 21, 2018.
Are there any comments? If not, received and filed. Do any council members have announcements at this time?
Yes, I have one announcement. Just a reminder about First Friday coming up. The Scranton Police and Fire Department are teaming up for a coat drive for the children in the Scranton School District. Their goal is to purchase 1,200 coats for the needy children in our district. The price of entry is $20, and that goes towards the purchasing of one coat for a needy child, and that is going to be November 2nd, 5 to 9 o'clock at the Hilton at 100 Adams Avenue. You can get tickets at the door, or for more information, you can call 570-348-4139. Thank you.
Anyone else? I have a few. This coming weekend, November 4th, ends daylight savings time. When you turn your clocks back, please remember to check your smoke alarms and CO detectors. Next Monday, November 5th at 5:15 p.m., we will have a caucus in council chambers to meet with representatives of NDC for an update on the parking system. And another reminder that recycling leaf bags are still available at all fire stations throughout the city. A date for when leaves will be picked up has not yet been announced. And finally, there was an executive session held this evening prior to the meeting to discuss a matter of litigation.
Fourth order, citizens' participation.
Our first speaker tonight is Joan Hodowanitz.
Taxpayer. We have an audit. It is dated October 23rd. It was put on the city's website this morning on the business administrator's page. We have an audit. I'm not quite sure how good it is, and I'll tell you why. First of all, Wayne, we stuck you on that parking authority board, and you're supposed to be looking out for us. So why do we still have an adverse opinion for no financial statements from the parking authority?
Well,
you got to whip them into shape, man.
Well, I'm not on the parking authority board. I'm on the other board. That's the CDP board.
Well, you better use your influence and
all right.
Somebody kick their tushies and tell them to get going with it. That's like the third year in a row. That's stupid. However, I didn't have time to look at all 93 pages in any detail because right now I'm crunching the numbers on the county budget. But I did, in amazement, turn towards the section on litigation, because I told you before I'd be very interested in seeing the city's take on these outstanding lawsuits. Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we have outstanding lawsuits that go back before January 1st of this year involving the sewer authority sale, garbage fees, rental registration, Act 511, and the pensions? Now, aren't those still outstanding last time I looked? Well, let me tell you what they did. It's paragraph 13, commitments, contingencies, litigation. They took the 3 pages from last year's audit and without a single change, cut and pasted in. And in that section, there's no mention of any of those lawsuits and the impact on the city. Now, maybe it's buried somewhere else in the narrative, but that's where it belongs. And you need to keep in mind that the purpose of an audit is to fairly present the financial status of the city. And you are one of the addressees as well as the taxpayers that paid the bills for this. And I can't believe that this thing is 5 months late and they cut and paste the litigation section. If you think that's bad, just above it, paragraph 11, credit and market risk is another cut and paste, and they didn't even change the 2016 number to make it 2017. You can tell how much proofreading this thing got. So when you go through this document, take it with a grain of salt, but I think each one of you needs to go through it carefully. And I want to know how the city can get away with ignoring the potential financial impact of these lawsuits. That's incredible. If it's buried elsewhere in the document, I will look for it. Okay, it may take me another week or so, but that's the paragraph where it's supposed to be. So 5 months late and very disappointing as far as I'm concerned. Now, item 5B, this $22,990,000 general obligation note. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is different than the $22 million that was garnered from the sale of the sewer authority and put in escrow to shore up the pension funds?
Yes and
Well,
no.
yes, no, yes.
Yes or no?
It is different,
It's
but it is also going to be paid off by those funds.
Okay, somebody's going to have to explain this to me. I listened to the explanation here. Jim Lockwood very kindly showed me the handout he was given tonight, and I think it's a different amortization schedule than the one that's posted to the website, because I thought your amortization schedule showed 5% rate of interest.
5.5.
This is 9%, and that's all that's on the city's website.
That's the other scenario.
That's a worst-case scenario.
I understand
The
it's the
9%.
worst-case scenario. Okay, this is what I want to know. On this obligation note, okay, first of all, I want a clear explanation of what this is intended to do. Mr. Bolzoni says it's to reduce the MMO in 2018 and 2019. It'll help with the operating budget for next year, which is a tight budget. Okay, fine. What I want to know is what's the total cost of this thing going to be, okay? And what's the total amount of savings? Put the two numbers together, and is it a plus or a minus? What is that number? That's the number that I want to know as a taxpayer. I also want to know why we're going through this if we have $22 million in escrow under the trust agreement, why we can't simply use that, and why this has to be done in addition. Thank you.
Thank you. Norma Jeffries?
Good evening, Council. My name is Norma Jeffries, and I'm here tonight for a couple things, so I'm going to have to talk really quickly to get them all in 10 minutes. Mostly it's a lot about the follow-up, and I wanted to know where we stand with the parking, I'm sorry, not the parking, that's on my mind, with the traffic signs and the street signs and things. I keep tracking the paper, and I don't know of any other way to keep track of it as to what is going on with that, the status of it, and where are we with that. And can you let me know, as a citizen of Scranton, how do I follow up on that and keep track of it?
Sure, I can follow up for you. I'm not sure if the DPW has met yet with the company that they contracted with for the new equipment, but I will follow up on that for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And my next one, of course, is the Treehouse Project in Naog Park. And there was an article in the paper on that. I'm going to need another desk to keep all these articles that I keep. But this one is from September the 28th. And they had quite a nice article in there on the treehouse. And they did put in, I did see in the paper where it was out for the RFQs. And they did come back. And then they were supposed to meet up at the treehouse, so that anyone who had bid and put a bid in to make the renovations to that treehouse, that they had an opportunity to come up and look at it and take a first-hand look, see at it. And I think this is what this article was saying, that they did go up there and they did look at it. But I haven't been able to find out anything else, and nothing else has been in the paper that I know of. I don't get the paper every day. I don't have time to read the paper every day. But I do get it on the weekends and Thursday. And I haven't seen anything as a follow-up on that as to where we are. Has the person been selected, and who are they, and what's the anticipated completion date?
I could have swore that we received an update, and I don't have it in front of me, but I will look and I will get that to you. We did just receive something, I think, from Mr. Fallon from Parks and Rec, but I will look for that and get it to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. And then my other thing, there's new subjects that I wanted to discuss, and as I read the paper, you know, I don't have anybody else to talk to, so I'll come to you guys and tell you what disturbs me when I read the paper. And the first one that I read was back in August, and it was about the shock when the bill comes. And this doesn't have anything to do with any particular person, because we all could be in an emergency room situation. And this talked about the surprise billing that comes when you go to the emergency room. Each one of the hospitals, the major hospitals, said that they do have a sign in their emergency rooms as to how you're going to be billed. But if you're in there in an emergency situation, that's the last thing you want to hear about or you even think about reading is that. So there was at least 8 pages of information, and I kept thinking, they're not answering my question. With all this writing and all these words, they're not answering the question. So finally, I did see in the back of the article that there are 2 bills down in Harrisburg, and I'm just hoping that people will take notice of them and start looking at their Harrisburg representatives to get these bills moving. One of the bills is the House Bill 1553, and the other one is the Senate Bill, let's see here, the Senate Bill is 678. And both of those bills are just sitting on the representative desk. And what they will do for us, if they would get these bills going, is that they want to, both of these bills are similar, and they want the hospitals to take the money that the insurance will pay, the fair rate, and just take that without billing the individual patient for the bill. And I know it's a big topic and a subject that when it becomes money's involved, that it's even before the Pennsylvania Insurance Commission is even looking at it. So I know there's a lot that probably is behind it that I have no idea, but I do know that a lot of people will benefit from these 2 bills. So I went and I looked, I said, okay, so who are our representatives? It's voting time. So when I looked on the site to get and see who our representatives are down there at Harrisburg, one is up for re-election, not re-election, he's running for the first time, and his name is Kyle Mullins. So think about that, because I spoke with him. I was at a open house, and he was gracious enough to talk to me about this, and I do have his card, and I will follow up, and I'm very confident he's going to be voted in. And the other guy is Blakely, I think that's his last name. And so I just hope that these bills will get off their desks. It's been since 2017, and they've just been laying there. But everyone will benefit from it.
Thank you very much. Before I call the next speaker, I did check with our attorney. Frank Scavell from Old Forge was signed in, and as our council rules state, without being a resident of the city or a business owner. Unfortunately, we can't let you speak at the meeting, but I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards about anything you'd care to address with us. Ron Ellman is the next speaker.
Sorry, Council.
We're worried about you.
Right there. That's Pizzoni's solution to everything. KOZs and just giving away the city to downtown. I'll tell you. I was at the dollar store today, buying some candy. You can't believe how mad this woman was after that was talking to me about you people, about the administration, not you people. This Mr. Durkin doesn't even live in town. What the hell does he care about taxes and foreclosures and everything? Abandonments. All he cares about is what's going on right downtown. You can see that people give their money to him and he gives it to downtown. Just like Bozzoni promised them the world downtown. In the meantime, every time it rains like today, my yard is flooded because there's never been any curbs on North Main Avenue since the city was founded. There's slate sidewalks all in my neighborhood where I walk my puppy. And all I hear about's downtown. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. This whole administration, these two no tax-paying hacks of the mayors, that's all we hear about is raise taxes in downtown. This plan right here, how can Mr. Durkin say this plan worked good in Philadelphia, we could use it? You're talking about a town 5, 6 times larger than us, a town full of factories, all kinds of businesses. They can afford to cover for KOZs. We got a town that's already, look at Kaiser Avenue. You had so many kids from that KOZ bunch of apartments, you had to build a school. Now you brag about 138 houses were built worth $22 million. Isn't that right? The value. You don't mention 10 years of no taxes where those people used our city insurance, our sewers, sidewalks, lights, school system. If they had 138 children, which is probably a lot more than they had, just 138 children, you're talking about tens of millions of dollars for teachers. 10 years, you had to have a dozen teachers or more involved with them. And you talk about they got free what people are paying for, like me. It's a shame. And you talk about more KOZs. We're facing all kinds of problems with the school system. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And I don't see anything happening on your lace factory except a bunch of people sucking up money and working by the hour. I go by there all the time zigzagging through town. Just another grant. The city is consumed with grants and a bunch of no tax-paying people all over downtown. What has been done? Have any of you lifted a finger about trying to collect some tax money from people from 5, 6 years ago, like Jefferson? Collecting rents, not paying any taxes. The city's full of them, and half of them are downtown. Nobody cares about them. Yeah, but you grab some poor guy's house for $1,000, $1,500 immediately. You want to know what an intelligent real estate man told me? When Mr. Doherty was here, he said, Mr. Doherty wants the bank building because the university is going to start growing one of these days down Cedar Avenue. Now you see, you people out there, you see why we're spending all our tax money on Cedar Avenue? Dozens of houses on Cedar Avenue not paying a penny in taxes. They'll be bought for a song by the university. You wait and see. It's a shame what's going on right under everybody's nose and not a damn thing being done about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bob Bolus. Mr. Bolus, before you begin, I just ask that that you refrain from any personal attacks against council members' families.
Mr. Rogan, I'm going to respond to attacks that were made on me last week. I have that right by Gahan, and I'm going to address them. First of all, he had made comments to the fact that I'm a legend in my own mind. Nobody likes me. I'm reading your minutes. That were your comments. Votes, the different things you said, and it disturbed me because I'm going to set you straight once and for all. First of all, this past Friday, I was interviewed by MSNBC. Did they come talk to you or anybody else here? They came here to see me in Scranton, and that'll be aired tomorrow. I've been interviewed by numerous TV stations, CNN, ABC, Fox News. I could go on and on. Plus 25 countries came here to see me. Did they come to see you? They interviewed me. I'm known around the world. I had an office in Singapore, had an office in Tehran, and I've employed over 1,200 people. How many people have you employed? How many jobs have you put here in the city, or in the county, or for that matter, in the country? When you challenge me that you think you're better. I've been awarded the American Towman Association's Medal for Heroism 3 times. And that's for saving lives on accidents, people out there that are alive today because of me, including that of 3 Pennsylvania state troopers that were hit at accidents. I also received the accommodation from the Florida Highway Patrol for going head-to-head with a wrong-way driver on I-75 and stopping the car, not calling 911. I took the car out. And I was given an accommodation both by the American Towing Association and the Highway Patrol for my heroic actions. What's your claim to fame when you criticize me that I'm a legend in my own mind? Far from that. I'm a legend because I've done accomplishments way beyond what a lot of other people have done. I don't like to blow my own horn. I don't like to say I did this or I did that. People have said it for me. Scott Schaefer, our news reporter, said he was out, met a bunch of celebrities, including Bob Bolus. Now, where did he get that from? But you weren't there. You weren't mentioned. You weren't ever mentioned as a celebrity. Yet you criticize me when you're not in a position to even do that. You're not even in my ballpark. You're not even in the league. And I took personal offense to it. And, yep, you brought out, I sat in a county jail one time. You're right. It's under an appeal. But you lied to me. As a public official, I'm not a public official. You lied about a letter. You shouldn't even be sitting in that seat. I don't take orders from employees when you told me to sit down. My time was up. You don't give me that order. I give orders, I don't take them. Okay, so let's set that record straight. You work for me, you work for everybody in this room. Come on in here, please.
Mr. Bolus, you're at the podium.
Yeah, but this is the purpose.
Bolus, come on.
Okay.
You're out of order. Mr. Bolus, I know you brought a prop with you.
Okay.
It's funny, but just have
my skunk. Let me, Pat, please let me finish. The reason this is, Mr. Gahan and his mother and all referred to me as a skunk.
Mr. Bolus, please do not attack Mr. Gahan.
I'm not attacking. I'm setting the record straight. I was referred to that if he gets into a contest with a skunk, reference to me. I just brought Uncle LePew here to show you that guys are decent people, and the only time we're alienated is when people step on us. And I want to set that record straight. I come in here because this is my city, and I give a damn about it. I fought for this
Thank you,
city
Mr.
for a
Bowles.
long time, and the purpose he's here to show Mr. Gahan everybody has a right here to speak, and when you insult us, expect the consequences. When you sit here and you tell me that you think you're better than anybody, let me just finish with one thing. I got this in the mail. I'm going to give it to you.
Mr. Bowles, your time is up.
I understand that, Pat, and I'm asking for a minute more.
30 seconds.
I want to read
Please wrap
this.
it up.
Here. Gahan attacked you because you called him out on his sister getting a job with the district. Don't let him silence you. Ask him how many of his relatives work for the district. At
Mr.
least
Bowles.
7. I'm going to give you this,
Bowles,
Mr. Gahan.
you're out of order. Let's wrap this up, and hopefully this is the end of this back and forth. Thank you, Mr. Bowles. The next speaker is Lee Morgan.
But when you make a comment and you want to attack somebody,
Mr.
make
Bowles,
sure
your
you're on
time
the
is
ground. I understand, Pat. I take it personally. I take anything that happens in this city. And when I have a councilman who's a liar, challenges my integrity and credibility,
Mr. Bowles, come on.
I'll be here
This
to
has been
take him
6-7
on.
minutes now.
And one more thing. Scavo should have been allowed to talk. I challenged from this forum.
I talked to Mr. Scavo before the meeting. I did.
Well, I want to set the record straight. I took it to court and challenged it when I was a candidate, and we're allowed as candidates, any candidate, to come before this forum. And the solicitor could check his records. That was wrong tonight.
We will check on that. Mr. Morgan?
Good evening, Council. Lee Morgan. The first thing I have here is that, you know, Ron Ellman got up here today, spoke. Mr. Bola spoke. Other people, other residents of the city are going to speak. The mismanagement of this city has been going on for decades, and it's just business as usual as we loot the city, steal off the residents, and it just continues and it never stops, and the borrowing never stops, and the debt against their house never goes down. It just keeps going up. And, you know, like I've said here a million times, it's nice to dress up in pretty little suits, but, you know, somebody has to do something for the residents of the city, and obviously it's you 5 council members and the mayor, but you're so busy mismanaging the city that there's just no time for the residents. And I really think there needs to be a study on the amount of vacant and abandoned properties in the city to bring everything really into focus. Instead of talking about the county doing a reassessment, I think that the voters need to vote in the next election and not be anal retentive, okay? They need to realize that this government doesn't function for them, and they elect people that don't have their best interest in mind. And when you look at the Scranton School District, and I know that it's not the city of Scranton, it's a different body, but those students are not receiving a quality education, and they haven't for decades. And nobody ever addressed it, and the residents of this city walk around like they're in a trance. And if you want to make this city better, you have to take the garbage out. And I hate to say this, but we need to get rid of the Democratic and Republican parties if necessary, because it's beginning to look like, to be honest with you, that the only thing that's ever going to change this country is what Thomas Jefferson talked about: armed intervention by the residents against its government. And that's, look at, not come on, Thomas Jefferson spoke about that, and the right to bear arms against, don't forget that our founding fathers fought Great Britain to push them off us. And when Thomas Jefferson talked about the right to bear arms, it was to push your government out of the way. And if you read some history, you'll find out that's true. And you know something, Mr. Rogan?
Nobody supports
you
the
don't
Second
have
Amendment more
to. You
than
don't
I
have
do.
to agree with what I'm saying here.
We've gone down this path before.
No, we
where
haven't.
You were making
I
threats
think
at
you should
meetings.
arrest me and take me out of here.
I'm not
going
gonna
to
do
go
that.
to a court.
No, we're not going to do that.
Determine what freedom of speech is, because you don't have to like what I'm saying.
And I don't.
And
But I'm going to let you
please
say
sit
it
there
as long
and
as
be
you don't
quiet,
threaten
or
anyone.
Bring some police here,
No.
here, and arrest me.
We're not
But
going to do
other
that
than
because that's what you want.
Sit there and be quiet. Period. Because you cannot contain my freedom of speech. You
And
don't
we're
have to
not trying
like it.
to.
And you know
And
the
we're
other
not
thing I
trying to.
have here is this. I had the opportunity recently to watch Mr. Pacheski in court, in Judge Gibbons' court. I sat there, I watched pretrial motions, I watched most of the hearings, and I'd have to say, with all honesty, that when you watch that hearing, it makes you question how this judge can allow the testimony that was introduced in this hearing to stand, and how all these pretrial motions were pushed aside by a sitting judge. And this is a judge that has a lot of the city's issues in front of him. And all these issues that are sitting here, that are waiting to be resolved, that are against the city, I feel sorry for the residents of this city, because I really don't think they're getting a fair shake in court, and they're not getting a fair shake by their government. And how can anybody justify the amount of taxation this city collects? No city of a similar size taxes their residents as hard as this city. And when you look at the sewer deal, you know, I'm waiting for the city to turn over the stormwater collection of the cities to some other party. Because what's occurred here is that our incompetent government, okay, gave Pennsylvania American Water the whole rate, even though it was a combined system. And now they're getting ready to legislate a new tax, a new levy, that's going to be on top of what they originally paid. So really, the cost of the residents is going to be a lot more than it was before. And the big problem here is in the next election cycle, you have to take out the garbage.
Thank you. Lenny Cerebro.
Hi, kids. Lenny Cerebro, Scranton resident. Last week when I was here, I spoke about the meeting that was supposed to come to order at the Kaiser Valley Community Center, what I understood for the purpose of the flooding problem in Kaiser Valley. I've been on this, as we all know, my quest for years now. And once again, here we are, a couple of years later, nothing's done. You know, when I spoke to Gary DeBillio, the president of the Kaiser Valley Neighborhood Association, he told me, you know, I contacted him, and he let me know that it's up to the council to set up a meeting at the Kaiser Valley Community Center.
Well, let me stop you right there. Mr. DeBillio was wrong. He's the president of the neighborhood organization. He could call a meeting of his neighborhood organization whenever he wants. Regarding a council meeting, that would be something completely different.
All right,
but
he
the meeting
told me that he has to hear from city council to set up a meeting about the flooding in Kaiser Valley, and it has to. It's supposedly there's going to be a citywide flood meeting, but he has to hear from council to set this up. That's what I stated last week, and you came down on me that, you know, it's not anything to do with you. It's totally Gary DeBillio.
That neighborhood organization meeting was scheduled the same night as our council meeting, so
Right.
well, none of us certainly would have scheduled a meeting that would conflict with our own meeting.
You than what I heard from Gary DeBillio. Anyway, once again, though, my main question last week was, okay, can't council set up a citywide flood meeting at the Kaiser Valley Community Center?
We, 2 weeks ago, Mr. Cerebro, I made a motion that passed 5-0 to invite the mayor and
Yes.
members of his administration before council in a public caucus to discuss not only the issues in Kaiser Valley, but all over the city, the different spots that get flooded no matter what happens when it rains. The city solicitor replied to that letter that Mr. Perry and Mr. Rogan are going to have a meeting with the city administration about the 2600 block of Pittston Avenue, I think. They did not reply to our request to have the meeting. So we're still waiting for a reply from the mayor and his administration.
And Mr. Cerebro, at that meeting, I brought you up by person about your situation because everybody was familiar about it. I believe there was engineer Mr. Pocius was there. He said he spoke to you personally, I think last week or 2 weeks ago. He was on site with you for
About a month ago.
For a while. He said I don't know what they did some work with you, or they will put pavers down, or something happened. He was kind of explaining to us at the meeting, and he was under the impression that you were okay with the work that was done. But he said if you did have any other questions, that you can contact him directly, because I did mention that you were at our meeting again Tuesday.
I never said I'm happy with the work that was done. What kind of work? There was no work done.
A few tons of aggregate was put in your alley by the DPW. Did that not happen?
The millings, what I
Right,
suggested, the millings that they dug up to do the paving in the area, which a month ago they left, and it's absolutely incomplete, the whole area. You know, I don't know when they're coming back, but Mr. Pocius said that he would be back the next day to finish up and do other things in the neighborhood. Now, they haven't come back. That's a month ago now. That's what I was going to ask about. Now, Mr. Pocius came out. What happened previous to that is Mr. Gene Vescos, who is was an engineer in the military, came up with the maps of the drainage system, and he suggested, Mr. Vescos suggested that there's a pipe that they discontinued a few years ago.
Mr. Struble, not to cut you off, but it's funny you mention that, because in our meeting, Mr. Pocius actually brought up Mr. Besco by name and those maps, and that's something that they're looking at for the spring, is to possibly...
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask.
He said on paper, it looks totally feasible to get that done. He said, but they're going to start in the spring to actually to dig and to look at it to see, you know, the realistically of the project. But he's pretty confident as is that it could happen. And he kind of described to us how it was connecting and bypassing that T intersection, which all that water hits.
Yes, everybody agreed that's a good idea. It's a cheap fix, you know, but I'm just worried that, is it going to be another, yeah, okay, we're looking into it in the spring, and the spring comes and goes and nothing gets done.
That's why we have to be the squeaky wheel. We cannot let it go.
I'm suggesting a follow-up on it to make sure that it keeps it fresh, that, you know, we can try it out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glynis Johns?
Good evening, Council. Glynis Johns of North Scranton. I just wanted to come up here again and give you some updates about the Complete Count Committee. I spoke on the phone with Ms. Kay Garvey. She's the secretary for Mayor Cartwright, and I told her that Lynn Newman, who is one of the representatives from the Census Bureau, would like to come and have a meeting with members of City Council and the mayor and members of the Complete Count Committee to start organizing and really get our committee off the ground. A lot of other cities have their Complete Count committees organized. The state actually has a Complete Count committee that was organized by the governor, and Scranton is kind of lacking behind in getting ours together. So I called her and told her that Ms. Lynn Newman will be here November 7th and November 8th because she's also conducting interviews for some positions for the Census Bureau and asked if that would be a good time. So I spoke to Kay Garvey, and she said she'd pass on my email and a message. So I'm hoping that we can hear back from him before then, so that way we can have this meeting. But once again, if that's something that's possible, the dates up in the air would be November 7th or 8th. The library also said we can have a meeting space there. I don't know what the protocol is for how you guys conduct meetings yet. So if that's a possibility, November 7th and 8th, she's going to be here from Philadelphia and would love to speak with the mayor and figure out ways that we can strategize on getting this complete count committee together, just to put that in the peripheral. The second thing I wanted to talk about again is this Friday is First Friday here in Scranton. It's a lovely time here. The Black Scranton Project is putting together a Black art exhibition that is taking place at the Scranton Cultural Center at the Masonic Temple. That's 420 North Washington Avenue. And it's an art exhibition that will feature the works of emerging local artists of color, among whom are talented contemporary artists, sculptors, digital artists, and mixed media artists as well. It's hosted by the Black Scranton Project, and our mission is to promote the visibility of our communities, highlight the talent within them, and offer a platform for conversation to challenge a platform for conversations and the challenges and victories of being underrepresented here in the city of Scranton. It's going to be a fabulous event. Again, here's the poster for people to see. We have a lot of amazing artists that are going to be displaying their work. There's going to be live musical performances. It's going to be a great time in addition to the Scranton First Friday events. So yeah, we're really looking forward to it. I hope we can get a good turnout. Definitely come, meet some new amazing people, family friendly, all ages. The art is, PG. So those are my things that I wanted to address council. If you guys can participate in that meeting for the Census Bureau, that would be cool. It's a meeting that's still in the works. I'm still waiting to hear back from the secretary, see if that's something that you all can do, or if there's any other email communications or other strategies that we can possibly go from here, because by the top of the year 2019, a lot of other cities, municipalities, counties across the country are going to be solidifying their complete count committees and start outreach, working with the Census Bureau, because April 1st, 2020 is when the count happens. And as we know, there are a lot of funds, $675 billion in federal funding that goes to Head Start, public programming, hospitals, schools, working on the roads, all of the things that we need, they give money for. So I think it's really, really important for those who don't know. In 2010, there was over 1 million kids that weren't even counted in the census, and I'm sure a large percentage, not a large percentage because that doesn't make sense, but a good number of those students probably were here in this city as well. So I just want to make sure that we're counted for and we get the things that we need to be a progressive city and kind of, get the ball rolling on doing things that are beneficial to our residents. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address council?
Marie Schumacher. First, I would like to state how happy I was to walk in the front of the City Hall and see the former mayor's photos on either side. I think that's where they belonged, and I think it's much improved. Now, 3A, as reported by Jim Lockwood in the paper, is one of the items on there. And of course, if anybody went on to 3A, you could see the Electric City Garage is on. Their request for a reassessment is on. Now, I would like to go, not because of what they're going to say, but I would really like to hear what our city representatives are, what kind of input they're going to have. However, considering that we've had a lot of precipitation, if the sun is shining, I have to do yard work. Otherwise, I will be there. The Sorrento roof, who's funding that? Is that out of our capital budget? And where is our capital budget? Why is it not online?
I'm not sure why it's not online, but I think all the money so far is grant money that's been spent at Sorrento, so I can check to find out if it's out of our capital budget, though.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. Now, going back in time, probably close to 10 years, there was an item reported in the paper where a police officer had done something, it was alleged, and it was serious enough that this person, whoever it was, never to be named, was given some kind of punishment by the head of the department. our police chief, but we had no right to know. I couldn't believe that. I mean, I think, if anything, we have a right to know. But I did go in and I did a right to know, and I came in and I reviewed the contract, and it's true. And I checked the new one when it first came out. It's still in there, and I don't really understand that. But what I don't know, and Mr. Perry, you probably know, or can find out, do the current contracts require that if any of the first responders, be it police or firefighters, are in trouble with the police, do something like, say, hit and run accident, and they run, do they have to report that to their superior?
I don't want to speak off the cuff about it. I can't imagine them not being able to have to, but I mean, I could get the black and white answer for you for sure.
Would you?
So you're like any kind of first responder, like ambulance or
anything?
Any type of first responder?
Anybody that's paid by our tax dollars.
Sure. Yeah, and the question is, if they're in any kind of accident on the job while they're responding?
No, anytime.
At any point that they would have to, a fender bender, whatever kind of accident, they need to
Well,
report that.
if they hit a car and it was proved that they ran, for instance.
A hit and run. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a crime, so I could imagine. But yeah, I will get.
Would you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would appreciate that. And again, can we get the capital budget put online? And for that matter, why don't we have the cash flow online?
Why it's not online?
I think, well, I think that would be, both of those items would be helpful. And then again, just reaffirming, Mr. Gahn, I believe it was you who responded that the remediation of the lot at Wyoming and Linden is going to be full remediation such that it could be built upon with a commercial building, correct?
Yeah, that's the document
with this
there.
funding that's in
Right, that's what
the cost sharing and the funding that's in here.
Yes.
Okay, so why are we going forward with the park is my question. Why don't we put that lot for sale? Everybody talks about the downtown. I mean, you're going to have the gas company building the one down by, or whoever's going to do it. I think it's a county doing it, but on the former gas company land. There's plenty of places, again, county courthouse is a block away. There are lots of parks around here. I think that is a corner that should be developed and should be on the tax rolls.
While I don't disagree with you, I know that the other corner should be developed as well, which is probably 3 times the size, and no one has stepped forward to do that yet. And that property was for sale. That was exposed to the market probably for almost a decade.
Oh, it was? That I wasn't aware of, but I think that should be put up for sale. And then why are we still a Class 2A city? We don't qualify. And again, if I may finish out on this thought, what we need is a home rule charter review. And maybe if you people aren't willing to do it, you have the power to do it. I don't think you people need to meet every week. I gave you the statistics before on how many resolutions, which are just sprinkling holy water on the mayor's selection anyway, and we don't get anything. Mr. Rogan said last week about when I asked that the minutes of the Scranton Tomorrow meetings be put on. That motion was not made, and Mr. Rogan said, oh, you had a great caucus in the back room a couple of weeks ago. That's not good enough for us. We don't know. Nobody comes out here and tells us what they said. So we don't know. We don't see the financials. We've given them plenty of money. How has it been spent? So that's it. I'll bring the big one on the stormwater next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Good evening, Council. Doug Miller. Just kind of to reiterate some of the things that were said earlier tonight, I thought a lot of good points have been made this evening. Ronnie Ellman, Lee Morgan, Marie, some other people. You know, when you really sit back and you take a look at the future of this city and where we're headed, I mean, I just don't know how we could sit here tonight and have any optimism. I mean, we have elected a council and a mayor who made a ton of promises during the election, and I just don't know what you could really hang your hat on at this point. We had a previous council majority that attempted to do some different things, to move us in a direction. You know, Mr. Rogan, you were part of that council. I mean, I know you yourself try to initiate some things, but we just keep spinning and spinning and spinning around, and we're not going anywhere. And when you elect people who haven't participated in public meetings, some of you are sitting in these seats tonight. You know, I've been coming here a long time. I ran for office. I was never elected, and I'm really not concerned about that fact because there's a difference between me and a lot of the people here. We don't sell ourselves. We're not lapdogs, and we're not bought and paid for. And maybe that's why I was never elected to anything. And like I said, I really don't care about that fact because that's irrelevant. I've come here for a long time. And, you know, I really do have a legitimate concern for this city, a love for this city. But I just don't think we're going in the right direction, as I've said many times before. It's not negativity, because we're often, a lot of us are in this gallery, we're told that we're negative. It's called realistic, reality. That's a word that we don't like to use in this chamber. You know, we have to come out of the fog. I say turn the fog lights on because we have a lot of delusional people in this town. We have a mayor downstairs who only understands chasing police cars and fire trucks all over town and playing with his police radio. I mean, call it what you will. It's ridiculous. But as far as the city's concerned, I know it's been brought up before. Some members of this council actually supported the idea of becoming a sanctuary city. Absolutely ridiculous. But for that sake, if you look over at the Holy Cross Hall over in West Side, the city of Scranton seems to have its first sanctuary. I noticed there was a big banner over there. Scranton's sanctuary location for our illegal criminal aliens, courtesy of Bob Casey, Governor Wolf, and Congressman Matt Cartwright. So we seem to be in that direction. So those of you who support sanctuary cities, crime, there you go. Anybody that can support that idea really doesn't have an understanding of it. We don't know who these people are. We want to just let them pour into the country. We don't know who they are. We don't vet them. But let's let them all come in. And I don't know how anybody could support that idea. If you support sanctuary cities, then those would be your 3 candidates next week. But if you support people who come in here legally, who are not criminals, then I think you know who those candidates are to support next Tuesday. But we have to get our heads out of the sand. We've been burying ourselves for far too long with just a lot of the ridiculousness that's taken place. As far as the amount of poverty in this community, I mean, I see it every day just in what I do in my job, dealing with seniors and Social Security. You have people living on fixed incomes in this community, trying to live on $700 or $800 a month. Do you ever talk to them, other than election time when you're out seeking votes? Do you ever take the time to walk through these neighborhoods and see the amount of blight and decay everywhere? But then again, we're going to go knock on their door and slap a quality of life ticket on their door because they have a blade of grass that's high or the porch is falling apart. Did you ever think maybe these people just don't have anything left to give? Yet you keep just coming back and pounding the living hell out of them year after year? They can't take anymore. You're forcing them out of their homes. They're being forced to go into elderly high-rises all over the city. You know, you have one of former Councilman Wexler's beauties over at the old North Scranton Junior High School with the vouchers. So, you know, we're not going anywhere. And it's really pathetic because we've elected incompetent people. I don't know if it's ever going to change in this town just because of the mentality of the people. I don't think the voters are ever going to smarten up. I've learned that in the almost 15 years that I've partaken in this public environment. The voters in this town aren't very smart, and they may not like to hear that, but what they want to hear and what reality is, well, like I said, we have to start talking in reality. The voters aren't very smart. They're easily misled. They believe a lot of the lies and silliness they hear from a lot of you people. Don't get me wrong, there are some people in this city in government that have us in their heart and when they're making their decisions, but for the most part, we're not going anywhere. But I hope people remember next Tuesday, sanctuary cities and everything else, who the candidates are. You know, Mr. Donahue, you could roll your eyes, but it is what it is. You must support the sanctuary cities then, so.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to address council?
Good evening, Dave Dobson, resident, taxpayer. On 5B, I wish we just used the sale from the sewer plant. Sewer plant's sold. Nothing I can do about it. Use the money to fund the pensions. I don't need that money being siphoned off of somebody's pipe dream. You know, you get an insurance settlement, I had a house fire, every relative knew what I should do with the money. I was in temporary housing. They're calling me up to buy a bed. Well, it turned out that the old lady that did it, relative, the guy, her neighbor worked at Mattress Man, you know. Gee, where am I gonna put it? Out in the middle of a cow pasture? Once again, you know, one of the things our governments do, and this is all federal, state, municipal, they don't make people realize what is spent on them. You know, I'm going to get back to one of my old speeches, Wayne. Dinks. Houses for double income, no kids. They pay taxes. They can't afford to commit crimes because they lose too much money on them. You have to hold your temper if somebody's bad-mouthing you in a bar or whatever, no matter how big and powerful you are. And, you know, it's 15 grand a year for one student in the school system. So by the time this money is recouped, the figures don't add up. And furthermore, our Greater Scranton Chamber of Commerce has been putting a lot of employers where the people aren't. A lot of old factories and stuff fell into non-use in Scranton, and we don't do anything with them. I drive by them every day, and they're putting them up on a boulevard up in Throop and Oliphant, and it costs money for a car. I knew of people that were working for $8.50 an hour, and they had to somehow scrape up the money for a car. And the first thing out of the employer's mouth was, do you have dependable transportation before we hire you? So now, I just bought an old Volkswagen in pretty good shape, but it was $6,000 and it was 12 years old with the warranty. I put an extended warranty on it, but you know, that's a lot of money to ask somebody to work for $8.50 an hour. And I want to talk a little trash again. Once again, I'd like to remind you that 99% of the people will pay to have their trash removed, no matter how they have to pay it. But there's always that 1%. They'll finagle it onto somebody else's lawn. They'll leave the bags, and bags, no. Barrels. Pile up on their lawn if they can't afford to pay it, or throw it on somebody else's lawn, or throw it in some corner of the area that really isn't readily observed, and it's just there's one way of doing things, and that's to take all of the trash out and don't destroy a system that's basically working except to collect money. We have to collect the money, and we have to clamp down on people that don't recycle, and I'm all for it. And more or less, like if you don't clamp down on them, it's just not going to happen. And it's a shame that, and I see a lot of other things, like I was riding through a court the other day up by Garrity's on Stafford Avenue and behind, in between, and there's two televisions sitting out there. One time, now are they good or are they bad? Did they just blow out and somebody put them there? Or did they buy those new fancy flat screen TVs and just not have the energy to take them 2 blocks over and donate them to Salvation Army or something, that somebody could buy one for 25 bucks if they needed one and didn't have the money for the fancy. And it's just a shame that, and finally, I'd like to just say with the Ironworks project and the flood project that was mentioned last week, or the flood problem, you know, is it want or necessity? Are we going to spend money on want or necessity? It's all who you vote for, and sometimes the biggest mouths get the most attention, but they aren't right. Have a good night.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council?
Fifth order, 5A motions.
Mr. Perry, any motions or comments?
Yeah. Good meeting tonight. Lots of things going on, lots of discussion. So let's see if I can get through this rather quickly. So I guess we'll start with the meeting that we had with the mayor about the 2600 block of Bernie Avenue, the flooding. Since that was the very first meeting called, Pat and I did ask some questions that pertain to more of the city than just that intersection, because I felt that was only fair. One of the biggest concerns was any kind of FEMA relief that we might get from the August storms. So I talked to a representative from DPW. The good news there is all our forms for the city were submitted in time to the county. The county's forms were submitted in time to Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania has submitted in time to the federal government. And we've met our threshold every step of the way. The county had met their threshold to turn their numbers into the state. The state met their thresholds to turn it into FEMA. So right now, all our work, all our sweat is done on our side. We're just waiting for FEMA's answer. As you can imagine, FEMA's been pretty busy with all their floods and hurricanes that have been going on. But right now, we have met every quota that we needed to meet for disaster relief based on that storm in August, and we're just now waiting for the word from FEMA to see are there going to be any funds given out to us. Now, if there is FEMA funds to be had, DPW director insisted that there is going to be an application process and an application class that will be taken care of by DPW. He mentioned something like the field house down at Weston Park being used, a big area where there'll be applications, there'll be people to help everybody get all their applications filled out correctly and timely. That will happen if FEMA releases money to us. They wanted to make a point of that. But as of right now, we're just waiting to hear back from the federal government. So our fingers crossed that there is some kind of relief to us, and if there is, we'll make everybody well aware of it, and we'll have a nice meeting date, a time, and have a lot of representatives to help us get the application process filled out for everybody. So that was one thing that we discussed. Another thing that is more of a city issue with the flooding was brought up is what happens if my street's flooded? What happens if I'm on a regular part of the city that's being flooded? As the director explained to me, if you live in a newer development, that is definitely going to be a single-use sewer line, so that is definitely a DPW storm drain situation. So your very first phone call will be to DPW. If you don't live in a newer development in the city, which is most of us, that's going to be a DPW responsibility, PA American Water Company responsibility. So the first phone call should go there. Now, if you're unsure, he said, please call DPW if you have any questions or any kind of issues that you're not readily getting taken care of by Pennsylvania American Water Company. On that, I did talk to Pennsylvania American Water Company. They are willing to step up their end of the bargain and to keep track of the areas which are being called in that are known flooding areas within the city, and do line cleanings every 6 weeks or as needed. And I asked them what or as needed meant, because we don't want to wait for it to get flooded to have that, oh, I guess we need that line flushed out because it flooded. We don't want that. We're trying to prevent it. So they're going to do routine inspections every 3 weeks on issues that they've had to flush out on more than one occasion. And if it does need it, they'll schedule for the next 2 weeks. I got that reassurance. So we'll keep a follow-up on that. They promised the flushing at 2600 of Pittston. I did a follow-up. It was done that same day. So I was glad to see them keep their word on that. And we just have to make sure that they hold their end of the bargain when it comes to other areas of the city that could help. Now, to the people that live on the 2600 block, these were some issues that we talked about that pertain specifically to that area. Well, we talked about the drain situation. They're going to be out 2,600 pits in every 6 weeks or more to keep those lines flushed from the sediment that comes down from Kane Street, from down Pittston Avenue. It's just a big bowl area like it is in most flooding situations. They're going to, instead of doing it when it gets into someone's yard, they're going to do it every 6 weeks. The one question was brought up by a resident of increasing the drainage pipe going across Pittston Avenue, and that is not possible. That was explained to me by Mr. Poshis due to the pitch of the road. And again, it gets kind of technical, but if we increase the size of the drain, we would have to lift the drain to get the right amount of pitch so there's not backflow, and he said the pitch of the road wouldn't support anything larger. He pulled out the old architect plans and building plans to when that was put in, and he showed me there was a request for a larger pipe originally, but it was shot down by PennDOT because the pitch of the terrain could not handle that size pipe. So that's why there was a smaller pipe put in than originally planned for. They also, now they gave no promises, but we started looking up, I guess you could say upstream, for where the process and the program started in the Penwood area. A lot of that water comes down, it tees off, it goes down Kane Street, and that water flows into Pittston Avenue. They couldn't make any promises, but they wanted to see if there's any way that they could diverge the water coming from there to a different route and then down Sanderson Street. He said that would be a bigger process, and he can't make any promises about it, but that'd be something they would look at too if flooding consistently happens there. So overall, I was pleased with the meeting, and I'm sure Mr. Rogan, you have some other notes from the meeting that he could throw into, but that was just the overall the overall thoughts of it. And on top of that, Mr. King, Mr. Poshis, Director Gallagher, they all give themselves up personally to anybody who has flooding situations in the city. They said to be called, and they will get out there as soon as they could to meet with anybody. As I explained, I don't know, Mr. Cerebro is, Lenny, you're still here. Mr. Posh was out to see you, and he said at the end of that meeting, if Lenny still has an issue or something else going on, to give Mr. Posh a call, and he'll be back out to see you. So please, use that to your advantage to take care of these issues. These guys know the issues are out there, and we're trying to take care of them. Moving on, I don't know if is Ron here, Mr. Ellman's still here. I spoke to Mr. Ellman earlier this week. We had an issue about a little porta potty request. If you want to send something else to Mr. Fallon. Mr. Fallon was busy this week with the demolition at Novembrino Park. Finally got started. The Novembrino Park demo started on that, so we're hoping that we stay on target. Our goal is to have that working and up and ready by some point during the summer of 19. But the question Mr. Ellman had was porta potty at Weston Park. And I know the city only has a limited amount of them, and they get moved depending on venue to venue on what's there, what's not. But if there is one that's freed up, and I don't know how Director Fallon handles it over the winter time, but they're requesting one stay at Weston Park for as long as possible. So if there's not a need, which there probably isn't in the winter months with Little League games and concerts and events, there's probably not that much going on. If one could be left at Weston Park for the residents there in that area, that request was made. And then also, since it was brought up and it was in the paper about the 10-year tax abatement, Mr. Ellman brought up KOZ. Forget KOZ as far as this side of the dais is concerned. I'm not for KOZs. That's a KOZ is a total tax abatement. You don't pay city tax, school tax, county tax. You don't pay wage tax. You don't pay tax on your building, your improvements, or your property. You don't pay tax on any of it for a set amount of time. That was some of what we did up in Tripp Park, for example. I'm not interested in going that route. I believe a couple years ago, I think it was 2016, this council, we talked about, trying to put some vigor into our real estate environment with a 3-year tax abatement. Now, tax abatement is the only thing you don't pay on is on new construction or improvements to your property. So if you're an existing homeowner that wants to make an addition, build up, build over, put a shed on, you're not going to pay any taxes on that for 3 years. If you're a new commercial business that you want to buy a plot of land on, and you want to build a structure on that land to conduct your business, we're not going to, the city isn't going to tax you on that new structure that you brought in to start your business on. You'll still pay mercantile tax as a business. You'll still pay wage taxes. Your employees will still pay wage taxes, and you'll still pay the actual tax on your land that you hold. That's kind of the difference between KLZ and the tax abatement that we agreed on in 2016. The chamber was in here last week, and they brought up a 10-year tax abatement, and it will hold true to the same form that we have now, which is a 3-year. It was just extending it out. Maybe that'll entice some people to come in here and do some business. Now, while I think it could help on the residential side, maybe get some of these vacant lots that we have used and built upon, I'm really looking at this more of as a commercial avenue to maybe get a business in here who's on, they don't know what side of the fence to be on. Do we build outside of Scranton, which has been the case for so long, or do we move into Scranton? Scranton's got a motivated workforce, but their taxes are higher than the surrounding communities, and that's just something we all know. So if we offer them a 10-year construction abatement or improvement abatement, maybe that's something that will entice them to come to our city. So, and that's just in our earliest stages of discussion. We talked about that in caucus last week, and you know, we'll discuss that more as time goes on. But it was just an introductory phrase from the chamber to see if there's anything that we can do to stimulate some growth in our city. We talked about Mr. Ellman's request, the Novembrino Park. Ms. Schumacher request. If we could send out a letter to Chief DeSarno and Chief Graziano to ask, I guess we could word it, if anyone is arrested and or convicted of a vehicular crime, is that a vehicular crime, are they obligated or mandated to report the incident to their superior? And that's all I have, Ms. Rogan.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Any motions or comments?
I have nothing at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Any motions or comments?
Yeah, briefly. As some may know, I'm a member of the Blight Task Force as part of the Blight to Bright program. In fact, as a representative of City Council, I'm the only person from the City of Scranton government that has attended the task force meetings. While there are still 2 more task force meetings to come, I'd like to discuss some of the findings and recommendations to date and how they may impact the city in its fight against blight. It should be noted that dozens of municipalities across the county have responded to requests for information and to complete surveys relative to important data on blight. City officials, as of today, still have not responded. I sent another request to LIPS today to see if they would provide the information being sought by the organizers. But looking at some findings from the draft report, 14.2% of all housing units in Scranton are vacant. There are over 2,283 vacant addresses in Scranton, with 52.7% of those being vacant longer than 36 months. That is an alarming statistic. An average above 10% is an indication of a weak housing market, among other things. So we have a lot of work to do on that issue. We certainly need to begin to document those properties and analyze their cause and effect on our neighborhoods. Also, of all the housing units in Scranton, the percentage of renter-occupied units are 49.1%, which of course calculates the owner-occupied units as 50.9%. The national average for home ownership is 62.9%. It is generally understood that when owner-occupied units dip below 50%, it is a sign that the conditions that lead to blight are going to be more pervasive and more prevalent. We absolutely must find a way to do a better job to increase home ownership if we are going to be a healthy and thriving city in the future. If the percentage of home ownership continues to decline in Scranton, if we do not reverse that trend, we will never have the stable neighborhoods that we want with the stable financial condition that the city must have to reverse this current wave of blight. So some of the solutions that we talked about to date are, of course, the quality of life tickets, which have been roundly conversed on, I should say. While Scranton has a quality of life ticketing program, across the state, similar programs are administered quite differently than ours. Most have first offense fines ranging from $10 to $25. Their success rates in getting problems resolved at the ticketing stage is high. In fact, at one example, Cole Township in Northumberland County, approximately 9% of code violators resolve the issue after a warning or after the first ticket is issued. Additionally, the issuance of tickets is limited strictly to quality of life issues only. Most have 10 to 15 different items on the ticket as part of the program. In Scranton, our tickets range from $100 to $1,000, and we have 29 different items on our ticket. The collection rate is somewhere in the range of 25 to 30%, but it's been difficult to determine that because I have not been able to get the information from the administration through LIPS in a spreadsheet format that makes any sense. So my point is that our quality of life ticketing program has to be completely reviewed and, if necessary, overhauled, and I fully expect that to happen. Another thing the city could do is work with the Tax Claim Bureau and decertify buyers at tax sales that have outstanding delinquent taxes, code violations, and municipal liens. State laws allow municipalities to challenge a successful bidder within 20 days after the sale, so that's something we could do very easily. Another blight strategy is the appointment of a property conservatorship. This allows municipalities to file a petition within the Court of Common Pleas to be appointed the conservator of a property for the purposes of making repairs to address code violations that the existing owner either refuses to do or the owner is unable to be reached or be found. That was approved by state law in 2008 as part of the Abandoned and Blighted Property Conservatorship Act. If the courts grant the petition, the conservator proceeds with the work and the owner has the opportunity to reimburse the conservator for the work completed. If the owner does not do so, the court may authorize the conservator to sell the property to recoup its cost. This tool is intended to deal with blight and abandoned properties that have been in that condition for a long period of time. It not only saves the city cost by eliminating the time spent trying to get the owner to comply, but it also could save a home or a property from an unnecessary demolition, as well as getting the property up to code, and finally, if necessary, it could force the sale to a new homeowner or a better investor. So that it's some current information from the Blight Task Force. There are several other remedies that are being discussed, including my ongoing plans for a complete review of the city's condemnation and demolition policies. My expectation is to have a final report based on those recommendations from the Blight Task Force to City Council for review by the end of the year or the beginning of 2019. At that point, I would ask or expect City Council to engage the administration to discuss our recommendations and findings and to begin implementing solutions soon thereafter. And that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Gahn, do you have any motions or comments?
Yes, I have a few. Thank you very much. Mrs. Schumacher asked a few weeks ago for a list of equipment used for stormwater management throughout the city. And we did receive a letter today from the administration, so I can give you a copy of that. And there are, I won't go through all of them, but there are 8 pieces of equipment that they use for stormwater management. So that is the list, and I will get that to you. Also, we have one bid that has been received for the Crowley Park Improvement Project, and that was by Chaluski Enterprises for $308,798.88. So that's for the Crowley Park Improvement Project in Greenridge. Mrs. Reed, if we could ask the administration for an update on any money that has been spent at the Serenity Center and just an overall progress update, I would appreciate that. Also, I'd like to announce that Councilman Donahue and I are holding an idea session Wednesday, November 7th at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers, and it will be televised by ECTV. And this idea session is going to be with local high school students and our local colleges. We're trying to engage our younger community, listen to their ideas. Councilman Evans and I met with the University of Scranton Student Government Club a few weeks ago, and they were very excited about the chance to participate in this idea session. So the overall goal of this is to tap into our youth, the youth that we have here in the city, and to try to get them more involved in local government. So we did send out an invitation to all the local universities and colleges and high schools, and hopefully we get some good participation on that. Also, we'll have the budget on our agenda November 19th, and since I've been here, I think we've only had the business administrator show up to give his presentation. I do think this year, especially in the caucus that we had before the meeting, there's a lot of different moving parts with this budget, especially with agenda item 5B. So I think it would be helpful if the mayor, business administrator, and his cabinet members could attend the public caucus so that we could have a conversation with them when we do have the budget on our agenda. I think that that would be very helpful, and I'm hopeful that my colleagues would agree and we could ask them to do that. I also have a question, Mrs. Reed. There was a transfer, I believe I brought this up 2 or 3 weeks ago, to the IT department from the Workers' Comp Trust Fund for somewhere in the area of $350,000. I would like to find out, and I didn't get a chance to ask tonight, Mr. Bolzoni, if there should have been legislation for that transfer, because we did pass legislation when we transferred money from the Workers' Comp Trust Fund into the Tree Shade Commission. So I'm wondering why there wasn't legislation for the transfer from that fund to the IT department. Also, as Mrs. Hodawanitz correctly pointed out, we did receive the audit. So I'm still reviewing that, and it will be in third order on our agenda next week, so to be included in the backup online if anybody wants to take a look at it. Also, Mrs. Jeffries brought up 2 points. Mrs. Reed, if we could ask for an update from the administration on the street sign project that's related to legislation we passed quite a few weeks ago, so I think it would be helpful for an update on that. And then an update on the treehouse, and I remember we received some kind of update from Mr. Fallon. I'll go back through my records and see what we have, but if I can't find that, we'll ask him for an additional update. The only other thing that I have is, I appreciate Mr. Perry's answers tonight to questions that were asked regarding flooding and the reimbursement method from the flood that we had in August. Apparently a meeting was held with Mr. Perry and Mr. Rogan and members of the administration, and that's great. But I do think that because the flooding affects all citizens throughout Scranton in each different part of the city, this meeting should have been held in public, in a public caucus, with all council members, especially because of the nature of the issue, not behind closed doors. And I'm not sure what everyone is afraid of, why everyone's afraid to speak out on this issue. Again, I mentioned it last week. I had asked questions and put them in writing on multiple occasions about the reimbursement method, but never received a response. And I'd like to ask my colleagues, what is the point of being on a committee? I'm chairperson of the Committee on Public Works. What's the point of me being on that committee if I can't get answers to any of the questions, and if there's a meeting that's held and I'm not even invited to it? And I've been bringing these issues up for the last few months. So again, I don't agree with the way that it was done, and I wish that the administration would be more open and more transparent, especially with these important issues that are facing all of the residents of the city. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. A number of items to hit on. Regarding the borrowing for the pension, a question was asked whether this money is the same as the money that is set aside, and I think Councilman Evans and myself at the exact same time said yes and no. In the purest form, this legislation does not touch that money. That money would continue to be set aside and earning interest for the city. On the other hand, you put 2 and 2 together pretty quickly that the dollar amounts match up. What this instrument allows us to do is to get that money into the pension fund quicker than if we just wrote a check, because there are other items that are still outstanding. This allows us to get it in there to allow it to grow. It really is a good time right now. There's been a little pullback. So that's definitely part of it as well. It is, and when Mrs. Reed reads it, it is a very lengthy piece of legislation, but I appreciate the caucus that we had today, because I I know I have a much better understanding of the inner workings of the legislation, and I know it is the administration's goal to pay off that note much quicker than planned. But personally, I feel if you could borrow at a net of really 2.5%, 3% interest and earn 7%, you're well ahead of the game. I looked at it obviously a little bit differently than our panelists did, because when I asked that question, they kind of got silent for a second. But so regarding the borrowing, the legal answer, I guess, is no. It's not. One does not have to do with the other, but the practical answer is yes. That's why the numbers do match up. Resident mentioned the park downtown, listing it for sale, and I agree. I made the same comments. I did vote for this legislation very reluctantly, and part of the reasoning why was we were told that mitigation of the hazardous materials to construct a park would be less costly and wouldn't be as involved as mitigating to build a new residential or a new commercial or residential building. I tend to agree that that property, I would much prefer to see it be developed than turned into a park. It's prime downtown real estate. And I know Councilman Evans has brought up that it was listed a number of times, and he is correct. But it certainly doesn't hurt to throw it on the market for a month and see what type of funds the city can bring in. And whatever money that was brought in can be used in other parks, in other parts of our neighborhoods to spruce them up, and we would grow our tax base by a large development in the downtown. I do agree that the large development projects have not been happening. That's why I agree with Councilman Perry's remarks that he made earlier regarding expanding our LRTA from 3 years to 10 years. And I do echo his comments that it is not even similar to a KOZ as far as the structure. Under the KOZ system, you do not pay a dime in taxes. You don't pay on your land, your improvements. You don't pay wage tax to the city or school district. You don't pay wage tax to the state. Under LRTA, you still pay all of those taxes with the exception of the improvement that you made on the property as part of that deal. So it is a much, much more watered down version of the KOZ. That being said, if there was a large developer that approached us for KOZ, I wouldn't be close to it. I think I'm maybe the outlier on this issue, but the Trips Park development was a huge success. If you go through there now, it's generating tons and tons of tax revenue to the city, and without question, if it wasn't for that program, it never would have been built. It still would have been abandoned coal mine land. So I'm not advocating going that far for individual projects, but I do think the Chamber's proposal is spot on for what we need to do. Regarding the stormwater issues, Mr. Perry summed them up pretty well. Just a couple things I did want to mention that I took away from the meeting is, and everyone who watches knows I've been critical of the DPW through the years, but on this issue, they're doing a lot more than we see on a daily basis. I know for myself, I was not aware that the DPW was in the Kaiser Valley as many times as they were. I was not aware that tons of millings were put in the alley by Mr. Cerebro and others to try to correct some of the problems that were going on. Certainly not a long-term fix, but these are things that we were not aware of. Thinking long-term, I am encouraged at the fact that they listened to some of Mr. Besco's suggestions. I think all the neighbors I talked to in the area seem to say that he is the expert on that area. He seems to know the lay of the land better than anyone else. So I do think that's something that I'm anxious to see if that could work. And it sounds like from talking to some people that it definitely can work. Regarding the FEMA and PEMA, Mr. Perry already hit up on that. And we are going to, Mrs. Reed, if we could send a letter to PennDOT asking for regular street sweeping on all state roads, particularly Pittston Avenue and Manuka. It was brought up that with the state roads, it's very complicated because the state is responsible just for the surface. We're responsible for everything under the surface. The water can be our responsibility or the water companies. So there's a lot of different aspects that come into play here, but that is one thing that if we could get a little cooperation from PennDOT, And not to say the city needs to do a better job of street sweeping also on our roads. But that's one thing if we could send that to PennDOT. As Mr. Perry mentioned, depending on if you're in an older or newer part of the city, it will depend whose responsibility it is. And, you know, DPW is your best first call if you don't know. When you have lingering issues like many do, you become familiar with some of the people. And the point was brought up at our meeting, and I wasn't going to mention it, but I do think it needs to be said. Unfortunately, water issues have come to the forefront this year, and this is the worst summer and fall that we've ever had, at least in my lifetime as far as rain goes. The ground is just so saturated. I still have grass growing in my backyard, and it's almost November. Most years by August, the grass is so burnt you can't even cut it anymore. That just shows how much rain we've been getting on a daily basis. The ground has not had a chance to dry out, and every time we get an inch of rain now, it's causing issues. Where in the past, if you had a regular summer, the ground would absorb much of that. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Hopefully, we do get a little stretch of dry weather here, but that's something that I do feel that did need to be said. And finally, I know Mr. Perry brought this up as well. I was unfortunate I wasn't able to make it over to the ceremony for the groundbreaking on the Novembrino splash pad. This is something that is extremely long overdue. I hope I never have to mention this project again other than the Novembrino splash pad is completed. I've lived on West Side my whole life. I know that park. I swam in that park when I was a kid. It's a shame that it was gone to such disrepair that it has to be demolished and rebuilt. But that being said, I am happy that it is being rebuilt. And for younger kids, nowadays it seems that splash pads are actually more popular than pools. It's easier to maintain for the city. It's easier to have for safety for your lifeguards. So this is something I am very, very fortunate that it's happening. We're very fortunate as a city. We're finally able to get many of these projects done that were lingering for far, far too long. So that is all. Thank you.
5B for introduction, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Scranton, Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, setting forth its intent to issue its federally taxable general obligation note series of 2018 in a principal amount not to exceed $22,990,000 pursuant to the Act of the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, 53 PACS Chapters 80 to 82, as amended, reenacted, and supplemented, known as the Local Government Unit Debt Act, finding that a private sale by negotiation is in the best financial interests of the city, determining that such note shall evidence non-electoral debt of the city, specifying that such indebtedness is to be incurred to provide funds to finance a project of the city which consists of, among other things, 1, funding all or portion of the city's unfunded actuarial accrued pension liability, and 2, paying the costs and expenses of issuance of the note, setting forth the reasonable estimated useful life of the project to be financed by the note, accepting a proposal for the purchase of such note at private sale by negotiation, providing that such note, when issued, shall constitute a general obligation of the city, fixing the denomination, dated date, interest payment dates, interest rate, redemption provisions, and place of payment of the principal of and interest on such note, authorizing specified officers of the city to contract with the paying agent for its services in connection with the note, setting forth the substantial form of the note evidencing the debt, authorizing execution and attestation of such note, providing covenants related to debt service applicable to such note to the extent required by the Act, and pledging the full faith, credit, and taxing power of the city in support thereof, creating a sinking fund in connection with such note to the extent required by the Act, designating the paying agent to be the sinking fund depositary, providing a covenant to ensure prompt and full payment for such note when due, setting forth registration and transfer provisions with respect to such note, authorizing the execution of one or more investment agreements by specified officers of the city, and the purchase of certain U.S. Treasury obligations or any other securities or investments in connection with the project, authorizing and directing specified officers of the city to do, to take, and to perform certain specified required, necessary, or appropriate acts to effect the issuance of the note, including, without limitation, the preparation of a debt statement and borrowing-based certificate, and the filing of specified documents with the Department of Community and Economic Development, all as required by the Act, declaring that the debt to be evidenced by such note, together with all other indebtedness of the city, will not be in excess of any applicable limitation imposed by the Act, authorizing proper officers of the city to deliver the note upon the approval of the Department of Community and Economic Development, providing when this ordinance shall become effective, providing for severability of provisions, and repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances insofar as the same shall be inconsistent herewith.
This time I'll entertain a motion that item 5B be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question.
Yes, on the question. You know, this was a lot of information taken all at once, but I appreciate PFM coming in, City Solicitor, Mr. Bolzoni. As they mentioned in the caucus, there's a lot of moving parts to this deal, and I know that I'm going to have follow-up questions on this over the next 2 weeks. I know that in speaking to the members that came tonight, the pension boards are going to play a part in whether or not this whole deal gets approved. They have to approve some things. There's going to be legislation that comes back to council where we'll have to approve an amendment to the trust fund, apparently. The other thing, and it was discussed in the caucus, and it's one of my concerns, and it has been one of my concerns over the last couple of months and in the last few years, is with the lawsuit that questions the legality of the whole sale kind of hanging over our heads. Should we lose the lawsuit, taxpayers are going to be on the hook for all of this money. So I'm concerned about that and whether we're playing with fire here, but I'm going to vote to introduce this and have more questions next week. Thank you.
Anyone else on the question? All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
5C for introduction, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of a tax and revenue anticipation note, series of 2019, in the principal amount not to exceed $12,750,000, providing for the dated date, interest rate, maturity date, redemption provisions, payment and place of payment in respect of the note, accepting the proposal attached hereto as Exhibit B from the financial institution named therein for the purchase of the note, naming a sinking fund depositary paying agent, authorizing the proper officers of the city to execute and deliver the note, and certain other documents and certificates in connection therewith, authorizing and directing the preparation, certification, and filing of the necessary documents with the Department of Community and Economic Development of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, setting forth a form of the note.
This time we'll entertain a motion that item 5C be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
Sixth order, 6A, no business at this time. Seventh order, 7A, for consideration by the Committee on Community Development for adoption, resolution number 80, 2018, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to apply for and execute a grant application by the City of Scranton to the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development for a local share account grant, gaming funds, Monroe County, in the amount of $62,500 for the remediation activities at the site of the future Pocket Park located at 248 Wyoming Avenue.
What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Community Development?
As chairperson for the Committee on Community Development, I recommend final passage of item 7A.
Second.
On the question?
Yes, on the question, I'm not completely sold either on the idea of a pocket park at this property, but either or, the remediation has to be done, so that's why I am voting for this legislation.
I agree with Councilman Donahue, and to follow up on the point I made, and I think one of the speakers made a really good point on this, it has to be remediated either way. It's been listed for sale, and it wouldn't sell with it being contaminated, which if you're a real estate developer, buying contaminated land is a little bit of a gamble. But I feel very strongly that this land should be listed. If it's permissible, I would even agree to list it myself free of charge through the real estate company that I work for if the city wanted to take me up on that offer.
Conflict of interest.
What was that?
Conflict of interest.
Free of charge.
Nothing's free.
It certainly is something that I think the city should explore. But as Councilman Donahue mentioned, the remediation needs to be done one way or the other. So I do support this legislation.
Yes, on the question, this was the pocket park was always Plan B. That was just something, I remember when Mr. Balzoni proposed that to council, we had this land, it couldn't be developed, it needed remediation, and what are we going to do with it? And so I believe at the time there was county and state funding for the park, which would be no cost to the city to turn it into a park. So I think, and again, I'm going back about a year or so ago, he said our choices was to leave it as brown space as it is now, or apply for the grants through the county and through the state simultaneously and use that to build our pocket park. The green space would be a lot better than the brown space. But Plan A was always develop the land. It just was so far along that no one wanted to develop it. But if someone wants to step in the 11th hour and develop that land, I'm all for it, because that's, tax dollars are what it's at in the city of Scranton, and we'll take all we can get when it comes to new tax revenue. So, yeah, I mean, let's develop it. If we can't, I think Plan B still should be the pocket park.
On the question, I don't know if there's restrictions based on the grants that have already been approved for this. We have a grant for the park, obviously. We have the grant for the remediation. I think that might be something down the road. I do know that the parcel was exposed to the market for almost 10 years, and there was no takers on it. Of course, there was the issue with the remediation involved with that, but I'm actually for the pocket park. I think it's a good idea. However, if somebody came in after the pocket park was built and they wanted to reimburse us for the cost of what we spent on the land, we'll move the pocket park somewhere else. But I don't expect that to happen. We have quite a few large parcels downtown that I'd like to see developed probably even before this one. One being across the street, that's probably the biggest single parcel in downtown Scranton, and it's gone undeveloped, and it's a parking lot probably for 20 years now. So we need to really concentrate on those large parcels. This is a small corner lot. I think what we have in place is a reasonable plan, and we'll see where it goes.
And just not to beat a dead horse, but just regarding approving these grants, as Councilman Evans kind of alluded to, if somebody comes in at the 11th hour and wants to buy it, the city could always turn down these funds if somebody were to come in and offer to develop that property. If the options are keep it as it is or put a park in, of course I'd want the park, but I would much like to see that land developed. Roll call, please.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7A legally and lawfully adopted.
7B for consideration by the Committee on Community Development for Adoption Resolution Number 81, 2018, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to apply for and execute a grant application by the City of Scranton to the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development for a Keystone Communities Program grant in the amount of $50,000 for the remediation activities at the site of the future pocket park located at 248 Wyoming Avenue.
What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Community Development?
As chair for the Committee on Community Development, I recommend final passage of item 7B.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7B legally and lawfully adopted.
7C for consideration by the Committee on Finance for Adoption Resolution Number 82, 2018, ratifying and approving of the execution and submission of the grant application by the City of Scranton on behalf of Scranton Cultural Center at Masonic Temple to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, acting through the Commonwealth Financing Authority for a local share account grant pursuant to the PA Resource Development and Gaming Act in the amount of $345,405 for the project to be known as Scranton Cultural Center at Masonic Temple Elevator Safety Modernization Repairs, located in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials of the city of Scranton to accept the grant if successful and execute and enter into a local share account grant contract and commitment letter with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to accept and utilize the grant in the amount of $345,405 awarded by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for such project.
What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Finance?
As chairperson for the Committee on Finance, I recommend final passage of item 7C.
Second.
On the question?
Yes, on the question. Ms. Hodowanitz, you had asked a question last week or the week before about this legislation, and we did get an answer from Linda Abley. She said that their budget says $345,405.25, but the way the LS grant works, they cannot include cents. So she reduced the amount to $345,405 even. In the narrative and support letter, it says $356,376 because in September, that was the amount they were looking to receive. But the $10,971 was work that was currently underway, and it had to be taken out of the application. So I hope that answers your question, but that's the reason that there was the difference between the two figures. Thank you.
Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7C legally and lawfully adopted.
7D for consideration by the Committee on Finance for adoption, Resolution number 83, 2018, ratifying and approving of the execution and submission of the grant application by the City of Scranton on behalf of Electric City Development, LLC, to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, acting through the Commonwealth Financing Authority for a local share account grant pursuant to the PA Resource Development and Gaming Act in the amount of $500,000 for the project to be known as Wyoming Avenue LSA, located at 614 Wyoming Avenue, Scranton, Pennsylvania 18509, and authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials of the City of Scranton to accept the grant if successful and execute and enter into a local share account grant contract and commitment letter with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to accept and utilize the grant in the amount of $500,000 awarded by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for such project.
What is the recommendation of the chair for the Committee on Finance?
As chairperson for the Committee on Finance, I recommend final passage of item 7D.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7D legally and lawfully adopted.
7E for consideration by the Committee on Finance for adoption, Resolution number 84, 2018, ratifying and approving of the execution and submission of the grant application by the City of Scranton on behalf of NeighborWorks Northeastern Pennsylvania to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, acting through the Commonwealth Financing Authority for a local share account grant pursuant to the PA Resource Development and Gaming Act in the amount of $78,960 for the project to be known as NeighborWorks Home Ownership Center, located at 815 Smith Street, Scranton, Pennsylvania 18504, and authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials of the City of Scranton to accept the grant if successful and execute and enter into a local share account grant contract and commitment letter with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to accept and utilize the grant in the amount of $78,960 awarded by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for such project.
What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Finance?
As chairperson for the Committee on Finance, I recommend final passage of item 7E.
Second.
On the question?
Yes, on the question. This is a really great project, and we've talked about NeighborWorks here many times over the last few years, but they really are the unsung heroes in the city of Scranton. They don't always get the recognition they deserve, and people often don't know what all the work that really goes on there. So, you know, the work that they do to help people in the city is unbelievable, and I hope they get this grant, and best of luck to them.
Yes, on the question, I would absolutely second that. The work they've done for us as our partner in the SHAP program, which is the Scranton Homeowners Assistance Program has been phenomenal, with 27 homeowners first-time homebuyers getting grants to fix up the outside of their homes. It's just been a wildly successful program. So, and we're actually talking to them again about another potential project that they can help us with. So, kudos to them, and this is a great project to rehab their home over on Smith Street. So, good luck.
My colleagues are 100% right, and just want to give a shout out to their CEO over there, Jesse Aragot. He's been absolutely amazing to work with. Myself and Councilman Evans been putting together the Homebuyer Assistance Program and the many other programs that they do. Paint the Town, where they go into low to moderate income areas and help people, particularly the elderly who can't paint their own homes, spruce it up and do these types of things for them. It's one of the best nonprofits we have in the city, and they really do a lot to give back to the community. Roll call, please.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7E legally and lawfully adopted. If there's no further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Meeting adjourned.